The assessment took 47 minutes, which was apparently a record. Not the good kind. The Vethali assessors, pale amber vapor columns in their pressure suits, communication nodes pulsing along their collar rings when they talked, kept stopping the scan to recalibrate their equipment. I sat in the chair they'd pointed me to, and watched them confer in low clicks and hisses, while their instruments cycled through the same readings for the fourth time. The briefing room smelled like ozone and calibration fluid. The overhead panel lit everything in a flat blue-white that made everyone look like they were waiting for test results, which I suppose we were. One of the Vethali's node clusters kept emitting a soft, repetitive chime each time it hit what I understood to be the lower limit of its measurement range. It kept hitting it. Lead Assessor Vethorak finally turned back to me. The translator rendered its voice as flat and slightly bored, the administrative tone of something filling out a form it could complete in its sleep. It said, "Confirm, you are performing no deliberate cognitive task at this time." I was also running through the torque tolerances on the secondary array housing, which I'd been meaning to check since Tuesday. Somewhere underneath that, I had a partial grocery list from 3 weeks ago that my brain kept trying to finish despite there being no groceries aboard. And somewhere below that, I couldn't have told you exactly where. I never can. It's not really a place. My brain had picked them up and carried them somewhere without asking. I said, "Correct." Vethorak looked at its instruments. Then it looked at me. Then it looked at its instruments again with the specific deliberate care of something that suspects its own equipment is broken. "Single thread," it said to its colleague, Vetharak, in what I assume it thought was a quiet aside. The translator caught it anyway. "Single thread, low amplitude, baseline noise only. The quietest cognitive signature we have recorded in 12 sectors." Veth Arak made a sound my translator rendered as somewhere between a sigh and a dismissal. "Log it and move on. We'll reference it in the bulletin as a lower boundary." They did. I know, because Ensign Rowe Castle forwarded me the assessment bulletin 3 days later with a note that said, simply, page 4. I was in there under the heading Cognitive Architecture, Observed Extremes, Complexity Floor. They'd used my scan as the baseline for the simplest cognitive profile they'd encountered in the sector survey. 14 paragraphs on how neatly and uncomplicatedly a human brain appeared to process information. Shallow working memory depth, minimal cross-channel interference, no evidence of parallel processing structures. Refreshingly uncomplicated, the bulletin said, in a way that managed to be both a scientific observation and an insult in the same clause. I filed it and went back to calibrating the secondary sensor array. Castle had included a second note below the first that said, "Should I reply?" I wrote back, "No." The routing crisis started 6 days later. The assessment vessel Kethavar 02 was mid-transit when the quantum navigation array locked. Not crashed, locked. The routing matrix had hit an encrypted handshake error in the corridor junction table and frozen in place, which meant we were holding position in a freight corridor with 4 hours of buffer time before the approach window closed, and we lost our transit authorization for the sector. After that, the next window was 11 days out. Vethorak's assessment division was apparently also the vessel's primary cognitive processing resource, because they were the ones called to the navigation deck when their AI couldn't resolve it. I know this because I'd been in the adjacent briefing room since that morning, doing calibration work on the deck-level sensor housing, which required me to be plugged into the same power conduit as the navigation station, and therefore physically present while all of this unfolded. Nobody mentioned my being there. I was below the threshold of concern. I had my notepad and a thermos of coffee, and a list of torque readings to check, and I was, by the official record of the Vithali Joint Cognitive Assessment Division, the least complex mind in 12 sectors. So, the encrypted routing matrix was a Class 7 junction problem, which I recognized because I'd spent 2 months aboard the Oreth Station freight platform the previous year, running similar handshake errors through manual diagnostic trees. The Oreth platform had a habit of throwing them on wet transit mornings, when the humidity got into the relay coupling. You learned to spot the shape of them after the third or fourth time you were the one who had to fix it at 5 in the morning, with a cold cup of tea going stale beside you. The error signature was particular, a specific kind of mismatch that looked like a hardware fault but was almost always a database entry problem. Something filed wrong somewhere upstream, creating an authority conflict the system couldn't resolve by itself because it didn't know which version of the truth to trust. The system was working exactly as it was designed to work. The design just hadn't accounted for the bad input. I was not on the navigation team. I had not been asked to help. I kept my head down and worked on the sensor housing. A calibration job at that level is mostly tactile. You're running a probe along a contact surface, watching a needle, recording numbers in a column. Your hands know what to do. Your eyes watch the display. The rest of your brain is more or less unaccounted for, and mine had a task. Vethorak's team worked for 2 hours. Their quantum processing nodes ran 17 parallel solution threads simultaneously. I could see the load indicators on the shared station display from where I was sitting. All 17 threads, running hard. They were throwing processing capacity at the problem in volumes I couldn't estimate. Vethorak's secondary cluster was running full recursive analysis. The AI was attempting lateral routing solutions and flagging each one as non-compliant before it even finished building them. The display kept cycling, solution after solution spinning up and collapsing within seconds, and the amber countdown on the approach window timer was moving, whether anyone wanted it to or not. Meanwhile, in the margins of my torque reading log, I was writing. Not deliberately exactly, My hand was doing what it does when my brain has been sitting with something for a while and is ready to put it somewhere external. Column 9. Authority flag mismatch. The classification tier was wrong by 1. I drew out the cross-reference tree, numbered the filing steps, noted which compact arbitration channel handled corridor overrides. It fit on 3 pages. I did the 4th page just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. At the 2-hour mark, Vethorak said something in its own language that the translator rendered as the approximate equivalent of, "This is not working." I set my stylus down. I tore the relevant pages out of the notepad and walked over to Vethorak's station and put them on the console next to its vapor column. Sector column 9, I said. Registry filing irregularity. 14 months ago. The corridor authority flag is 1 tier high. Manual arbitration override through channel 7 should clear it. The cross-reference numbers are on page 2. Vethorak looked at the notepad pages. Then it looked at me. Then it looked at the pages again. Its communication node pulsed once, which my translator couldn't parse. It rendered it as a non-linguistic state indicator and left it at that. Neither of them said anything else to me. I don't think they knew what to say. I went back to the sensor housing. Vethorak's team filed the arbitration override. The routing matrix cleared in 9 minutes. We made the transit window with 41 minutes to spare. I finished the calibration log, marked the sensor housing as nominal, and went to get coffee. The amended assessment bulletin came through 2 days later. I know, because Ensign Cassell forwarded it again. Same note, page 4. The entry under Cognitive Architecture, Observed Extremes, Complexity Floor, had been updated. The 14 paragraphs were still there. At the bottom, someone had added a supplemental note in the formal language the Vithali used for addenda. Subsequent operational observation suggests initial complexity classification may have been applied to the incorrect processing layer. I thought that was probably fair. I filed the amended bulletin next to the original, in the same folder I'd been keeping since page 4 of the original. Seemed right to keep them together. Then I went back to looking for the grocery list. I was fairly sure I'd needed eggs.